Moving on now, Hana Szenesh is a mythological figure in Israel, sometimes called the Israeli Joan of Arc and presented as Israel's first feminist. She was among the first Jewish paratroopers. In 1944, she was sent to her native country of Hungary, where she was apprehended by the Nazis and executed 70 years ago this week. David Gombin and Pazit Dank followed the story and the legend of Hana Szenesh, who remains controversial to this day.
She was a feminist. This is something you can find both in the letters she wrote and in the writings in her diary, and also in her attitude.
We actually didn't find in her letters any reference to the theme of equality or the fact that women are discriminated. Her views didn't refer to this topic, as if it didn't exist, but we can find clues here and there.
For 70 years, Hana Szenesh has been in Israel a Zionist and feminist hero for some, and a myth for others. Her intellectual heritage is still controversial, sometimes called Israeli Joan of Arc. Her destiny, recorded both in her diary and in her correspondence, is tragic. An ideal journey to becoming a national myth. Let's start with the facts. Born in Hungary in 1921 in a family of assimilated and intellectual Jews, in 1938 she gets involved in the Zionist movement. In September 1939, as war breaks off, she immigrates to Palestine, where she joins the agricultural school of Nahalal. In 1941, she was among the pioneers founding the kibbutz of Sdot Yam. Close to Caesarea, a life made up of fastidious tasks as described in her diary. In 1943, she enlists in the British Royal Air Force and becomes a parachutist in the famous SOE. Not a trifling fact for this 22-year-old woman. She is then sent on a mission to Hungary, where she is soon caught by the Nazis on September the 7th of 1944. She is killed by a firing squad. 2 years later, the myth is born. In 1946, a first edition of her diaries and letters are published, a partial and abbreviated edition. According to Ruthie Glick, who wrote the book on the topic, those editorial interventions contributed to the myth building.
They have mainly censored her criticism from her experience in Israel, her difficulties, and they made her much more heroic. All the difficulties were made less prominent, and the ethos and mythos were stressed, and those things strengthened the heroic image.
Although, according to her nephew, this myth building seems to be legitimate, since she showed a real attachment to Zionism.
There is a strong significance to her words in her understanding of what we're doing here in Israel. She was writing before the Holocaust happened, or before it was clear what happened during the Holocaust. It was a more pure Zionism.
In a country in progress where socialist values of equality between genders were dominant, Hana Szenesh was pushed forward as a hero, a feminist hero. Ruthie Glick, who's fluent in Hungarian, read the original manuscripts and found that the original translation served the myth.
Yes, they were in need of a myth, of a combatant woman, and she served that myth. But I think we need to look backwards and say, okay, what really happened in her life?
I think that according to the spirit of the time, it's hard to say that it was a fanatic kind of feminism. She had thoughts about equality between men and women.
She perhaps wasn't an enthusiastic feminist, but her social background might explain her views on life in the kibbutz.
Her feminism was bourgeois, which was different. Really, it wasn't rebellious. This is a feminism of high-class ladies, educated ladies, who sometimes had a profession, but they always remained in a certain family framework, wherein the man is... It always remains within the established order.
For the first time in exactly 70 years after her death, Hana Szenesh's entire untouched diary and correspondence is published entirely in Hebrew. It's an opportunity for a new generation to make their own opinion about the heroic and the feminism of Hana Szenesh.